Welcome to Sowing the Seeds for Sustainable Development, an amazing story of how a Rotary project that provides farmer training and microcredit has made a difference in Mubende, Uganda. We all know that Rotarians are people of action. Together, we create opportunities to help individuals and communities thrive financially and socially. You will hear how people of action have served to change lives and continue to make a difference in the lives of thousands of farmers in Uganda. After hearing this story, if you would like more information on how you and your Rotary Club can improve economic opportunity in your community or in a community you support, please visit the Rotary Action Group for Community Economic Development on the web, find us on Facebook, or just send us an email. It is my great pleasure to introduce you to Maya Smelders of the Abington Vesper Rotary Club. Maya has been in charge of the Abington Vesper project in Mubende for the last 10 years. She visited Mubende for the first time in 2011 and has been hooked ever since. Maya's passion for international development goes back to 1973, when she represented an international women's organization at UNESCO. Those were exciting years when World Population Year and International Women's Year were the hot topics of discussion. In recent years, Maya and her husband have spent 2 months per year in Mubende, sometimes joined by other Rotarians. They feel they are among friends and can't wait to visit again when it is safe to do so. Please welcome Maya Smelders.
Thank you, Nick, for your kind introduction. Sowing the Seeds for Sustainable Development. Rotary Club Abingdon Vesper, a club in Oxfordshire in the UK, has been working in Mubende district in Uganda through a variety of projects for the last 24 years. I will give you a short overview of how it all started. It started in 1997 with a small group of Rotarians going to Mubende to buy and distribute wheelbarrows and other farm tools to women groups. They had heard about Mubende from a Ugandan student studying agriculture in England, and they decided to go and see for themselves what they could do to help. They came back inspired, and lots of district grant-aided projects followed in support of farmers, schools, and the hospital. As you can see, these included a goat breeding program, rainwater harvesting systems, wells, latrines for girls, school desks, computers, and for the hospital, washing machines and mattresses. We continue to do this type of small grant projects almost every year. When we met the late CEO of Kulika, a Ugandan NGO working in the field of sustainable rural development, we started a small agricultural microcredit project with just 3 groups in 2007. This has gradually grown and matured into today's program, which is the main topic of this talk. Kulika Uganda is still our partner today. And while visiting microcredit groups, we became more and more aware of the poor state of the schools in the villages and the number of children not attending school at all. So from 2015 onwards, with funding from a Dutch foundation, we added a designated primary school development program called Learning for Life. It reaches 5,000 children in 10 village schools. And this multifaceted program complements the microcredit, as all of these schools are situated in the vicinity of our farmer groups. In all of these projects, we aim to give a hand up, not a handout. Metaphorically speaking, what we do is sowing the seeds for development, but the farmers themselves are making them grow. Between the different projects, we can tick the boxes of 16 out of 17 separate UN Sustainable Development Goals. With all these earlier mentioned activities, these people here, the key farmer trainers, are, as the name suggests, key. They are farmers from different villages who have had a year's training at Rusid Organic Agricultural College in Mityana, not very far from Ubende. In return for that training, they share their knowledge with farmer groups. They also teach them saving and lending, bookkeeping, and building fuel-saving stoves. Without them, our projects would not be possible. A few words about Uganda. It is that small pink country on Lake Victoria, surrounded by Kenya, South Sudan, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, and Tanzania. Mubende district, with Mubende town at the center, is about 100 miles west of the capital Kampala. Our microcredit groups are in the green areas within a radius of about 30 miles around Mubende town. And as time goes on, we tend to go further and further away from the town. Now, Uganda is a country with a very fast growing population. In 1950, there were just 5 million inhabitants. In 1995, 20 million. And today, 47 million. The population increases by an average of 4,000 people every day. This year alone, the population is expected to grow by 1.5 million people. 78% of Ugandans are under the age of 30. If this trend continues, it is possible that there will be 200 million inhabitants by the end of this century. I don't think that any country is able to sustain such growth. In fact, already today we see the pressures that it brings. There is land shortage. We notice it in our farmer groups that farms are getting smaller and smaller. There is deforestation. Forest cover has decreased from 24% in 1990 to 9% in 2016. Today, 5 years later, that percentage will have decreased further. And again, we see the effects of this clearly in the groups, as the women are having to spend more and more time and energy to collect firewood for cooking. There are insufficient schools, they have overcrowded classrooms, and they are often too far apart for children to reach on foot. There is also a high level of youth unemployment at every level of education. So clearly, much more needs to be done to keep girls longer in education, because this has shown to lead to smaller families. Family planning also needs to become accessible to all who want it, including in the rural areas and for young people. This is what the countryside looks like. A beautiful, lush country for most of the year. The climate is tropical, but thanks to the country being at an altitude of 1,500 meters, it is not too hot. There are 2 wet seasons, which can bring 40 inches of rain per year. There are also 2 dry seasons, when droughts occur as the soil does not retain water well. These beautiful cranes are the national birds of Uganda, and we were lucky to see them. How is life in the village? It is not always easy for people in the developed world to imagine what it is like to live in a remote Ugandan village. There is no running water, no electricity, unpaved roads, no public transport, poor healthcare, and farmers only have simple hand tools to work with. Why did we choose agricultural microcredit? Well, 75% of the rural population lives of the Ugandan population lives in rural areas. And most of them are underserved subsistence farmers. How? By giving training and loans to farmer groups. Where are our funds coming from? The microcredit fund comes mainly from my own Rotary Club Abingdon-Vesper, with contributions from Rotary Club Breda Mark en A in the Netherlands, Rotary Club Roma Castelli Romani in Italy, Rotary Clubs Antibes Antipolis and Sofia Antipolis in France. This is a good example of international cooperation between Rotary clubs. The funding for 2 agriculture college training courses have come from an education fund in the Netherlands. Do we have a partner? Yes, local NGO Kulika Uganda. The microcredit fund is held at Kulika, but the day-to-day management of the scheme is done by our own local coordinator in Mubende and by ourselves in the UK. Rotarians visit Mubende every year and keep in touch during the rest of the year by WhatsApp and email. What are our aims? We want to achieve increased food production and family income for the farmers. We also want the project to have a high level of sustainability. And the effect? We believe that it empowers the beneficiaries and leads to a better quality of life for them, their families, and their communities. How do we select a group of farmers? We look for a stable group of 20 to 40 farmers. I have underlined farmers because in our experience, a mixed group of farmers and traders does not function well. The 2 categories need different microcredit conditions. Traders often want larger, short-term loans and can afford to pay interest after a short period of time. Farmers, on the other hand, need longer loan periods, low interest rates, and most importantly, a payment holiday at the start of the loan. This needs to be long enough to bridge the period in which their crops or animals are still growing and they have no income. Groups further need to be adults. The group needs to be registered and have a bank account, and also elect an executive committee with both the secretary and the treasurer being literate. We also look for some financial activity going on, either a simple cash round or a saving and lending scheme, not just forward sharing of farm animals. This shows us that the members want to move forward to a cash-based society. Our groups are extremely varied. There are groups of men, women, disabled persons, mixed gender, young and old. In total, we have 120 microcredit groups since 2007, and many more groups are in preparation, as the scheme is really popular. These pictures in the background show a number of our groups. Here you have, Here you see one of the women groups. There are currently 40 groups with microcredit. A similar number of groups is in training, and there are 80 past groups. Simply put, this is how microcredit works. A group first receives training by a key farmer trainer. Besides teaching organic farming methods, he or she establishes a saving and lending scheme with a loan and a cash book. We encourage the group to adopt the same system that they will use once they receive the loan, because this ensures a smooth transition. This preparation period can take well over a year, even two. The reason for this might be that there are not enough funds available, as we can only pass on funds that have been returned by other groups. It can also be because we think that a group needs to gain more experience. But that doesn't mean that the group is wasting its time waiting for microcredit. On the contrary, by saving and lending to its members using its own savings, a group will slowly but steadily develop and grow its loan pool, as well as the income of their members. It is not a bad idea for group members to gain experience with small loans before taking on bigger risks. And this thorough preparation period also shows us whether or not a group has staying power. When sufficiently trained, the group receives a microcredit loan of 3 to 4 million Ugandan shillings, which is about 1,000 dollars on average. The exact amount of the loan depends on the size of the group. The key farmer trainer will continue to give regular agricultural training and guidance. The group's progress is also monitored by the local coordinator and by Rotarians who visit every year. These visits are important to give encouragement and to give advice. Once given, the microcredit remains with the group for 3 years and is administered by them. Members pay interest, not to us, but to their group. And this money gets added to the loan pool and will form the future capital of the group when the microcredit loan comes to an end. After 3 years, the group pays back the original loan, and each group member is co-responsible for the repayment of that money. We call this collective responsibility. And we then pass the money on to a new group. So let us now have a look at how loans are given to individual farmers within the group. First, a farmer presents his or her investment plan to the group. The group discusses the proposal and decides whether or not to grant the requested loan in full or in part. Group members know each other's strengths and weaknesses much better than an outsider would. It is important that group members have a say and approve the plan, because remember, they all carry responsibility for repayment of the original loan at the end of the 3-year period. If approved, the farmer will receive his or her loan for 10 months. The group will often demand a security in the form of an animal or a guarantee from another person. This security is only for the group, again, not for us. Repayment of the loan is in 3 equal installments after 4, 7, and 10 months. During the first 4 months, interest accrues but is not paid until the first installment is due. This grace period allows the farmer to grow and sell his crops or animals before having to make any payments. Groups can set their own interest rate, but not above 3% per month. This is calculated only over the declining balance as the outstanding loan sum gets smaller after payment of each installment. Many groups are at first tempted to charge higher rates, thinking that this will grow the loan pool faster. But experience has shown that the opposite is true. And that is because the borrowers will not be able to keep up such payments, fall into arrears, and eventually the group will end up falling apart. And of course, we want these loans to enable individual farmers to make a profit, not only to benefit the group. There needs to be a balance between those two interests. Farmers who take a loan must invest this in income-generating activities only. There is again a temptation to spend the cash immediately on household items or school fees, but that must come later after profits are made. These pictures show the kind of things farmers can invest in: renting land, hiring labor, buying seeds or livestock. Let me show you an example of one lady. Her name is Susan. She borrowed 200,000 Ugandan shillings, about $55. She bought a calf, raised it, and sold it for 500,000 shillings, paid off the loan, bought land, and paid also school fees. As she had been a good borrower, she received a second loan from her group and bought another calf. But this time luck was not on her side. She needed money to pay a hospital bill. She sold the animal early for 400,000 shillings, paid the bill, but kept enough to buy another calf. And this calf is already worth 450,000 shillings. This shows that Susan has learned to plan. She feels in control and more secure. And we have thousands and thousands of examples like that. Now, 2020 was a disaster year. It started with a bad harvest due to drought. Sadly, this year, drought is happening again. Then came the desert locust swarms, although luckily Mubende was not badly affected. And of course, COVID-19 struck the world. Uganda initially had few cases, but since May of this year, a devastating wave of infections, much worse than before, is taking hold, and there are no vaccines to stop it. The COVID restrictions, which started in March 2020 and have now been imposed again, are very strict. No transport of people, no meetings of more than 5 people, night curfew, schools closed, shops and markets closed. And especially this last restriction has hit the farmers hard, as it made the sale of produce very difficult. The question arises, how did the microcredit fare in 2020 and 2021? Actually, surprisingly well. Some groups paused, but the majority kept going, finding ways around the restrictions. Of the 13 groups that were due to pay back their loans, 12 did in full, and the 13th has paid 50% and has promised to pay more. This means that 95.5% of the loans were recovered. We were also able to launch 5 new microcredit groups, and more will follow next month in time for the new growing season. As I previously mentioned, key farmer trainers give practical training to their groups at least once every quarter. They will talk about things like soil fertility, rotating crops and interplanting, making organic fertilizers, mulching, organic pest control, water management, planting agroforestry trees, and building fuel-saving stoves. You may ask, why are these fuel-saving stoves so important? Well, women in Uganda cook on open fires and need to spend up to 5 hours every day to collect a bundle of firewood. A mud stove saves 2/3 of firewood. So women with a fuel-saving stove need to collect less wood and gain 25 hours a week, which adds up to 60 days per year that they can use for other gainful activities. The stoves also improve people's health, as they greatly reduce smoke inhalation and the risk of burns. There are internal smoke channels in the stove that bring most of the smoke outside the kitchen. They obviously save trees and therefore help to combat deforestation and climate change. And also, by building stoves together, the cohesion in a group is greatly enhanced, and this in turn improves the functioning of the group. Apart from in-group training, we organize an annual training seminar for group leaders, attended by some 140 farmers on day 1 and 90 on day 2. This includes the leaders of potential microcredit groups, so that they can benefit from all the training even before getting a loan. On this first day, we invite speakers from other Ugandan organizations to talk about farming and health-related topics. This can be about specific crops or animals, about farm economics, rainwater collection, land rights, or reproductive health. Mubende Hospital kindly offers free HIV testing alongside the seminar for those who want to check their status. Unfortunately, not many cases have been discovered, but when they were, support and medication were offered. On the second day, we train the treasurers in bookkeeping and give each treasurer a small calculator. There are also prizes for the best kept financial records. I can tell you that giving these prizes is getting harder every year. This is a very good sign that the bookkeeping standard is improving. It is important that these skills are well understood and practiced, as the group needs to be able to administer the loans independently. The treasurers also have to pass a bookkeeping test before a group can qualify for a loan. We also give out completion certificates to those groups that have paid back their loans. These certificates are proof that a group has lending experience, and this is recognized by the local banks should a group wish to borrow commercially. But most groups, in fact, prefer to stick to their own loan pools, which they have been able to build up during the 3-year microcredit period. You could say that they have by that time become a mini cooperative bank. We have 73 fully paid up groups and 7 groups with different levels of arrears. That amounts to 3.5% in unreturned loans. This is not bad for unsecured loans, considering the level of vulnerability and inexperience of our clients. Many a bank would be jealous of that figure. But to be honest, getting loans repaid is not always easy. We have had cases where executive members had misappropriated money from the group. And in 2 of those cases, we have taken the individuals to court, which resulted in them having to pay much more than they otherwise would have had to pay. And this now serves as a warning to others. We would not have taken such steps if non-payment was due to factors outside their control. I can say that most groups understand that the loans need to be repaid and that other farmer groups should also be given an opportunity. And if a key farmer trainer has formed a good relationship with the group and attends regularly, then repayment usually follows as a matter of course. When we do have a problem, then the village elders will also intervene. This scheme has helped 3,500 farmers to help themselves get on in life. Counting also their family members, we estimate that over 25,000 people have directly benefited from it. Now, what does a microcredit scheme cost? Initially, you need a microcredit fund. We started with just $4,000. Then that became $15,000 and now $48,000. This money will get recycled time and time again. You also need agricultural trainers. A training course at the agricultural college cost us $10,000. We ran 2 courses, 5 years apart, so we spent $20,000 on that. Then there are the annual costs. The local coordinator needs to be paid a part-time allowance, and this is paid by Vespa Rotary. The key farmer trainers, who share their knowledge in return for their own college training, get a small fee to cover their expenses when they provide training to a group. We ask the group to pay for that fee. We think that is fair because they are the beneficiaries of the training and knowledge has a value. But this doesn't always function well, so we have started to keep a small amount of the loan back for this purpose. Other annual costs are the yearly training seminar for group leaders at $1,000 and the yearly self-funded visits by Rotarians to all the groups. These visits are important in order to motivate staff and microcredit groups and also to liaise with local leaders. They allow us to pick up early signs of derailment in a group and to make suggestions to get it back on track. We also arrange the seminars to coincide with those visits. Let us have a look at the effects of microcredit on groups and their members. First of all, food security. This remains one of the most important outcomes as climate change is making rains less predictable and there is no social safety net in Uganda. Secondly, agricultural know-how. How to grow healthy food without unnecessary use of expensive and dangerous chemicals. When African farmers spray chemicals, it is often without proper knowledge and body protection. So the less such chemicals are used, the better it is for their health, their pockets, and the soil. Thirdly, planning and marketing. 2 very important skills for profitable farming. This includes keeping farm records to keep track of expenses and income. We discovered that many farmers were previously unaware whether or not they had made a profit on a particular crop. Knowing which crops are the most profitable helps to decide which cash crop to plant in the future. Fourthly, environmental awareness. Farmers are now more interested in planting trees and optimizing water resources. more family income, which can be spent in many different ways. Farmers are often short of cash, yet as the country develops and services like water and electricity spread slowly into the countryside, they will need more money to pay for those services. And it is therefore good that they can increase their cash earnings. The income can be spent on children's education and future. We have examples of children going to university or setting up a business thanks to their parents being part of a microcredit group. The man on the left is proudly showing pictures of his children's graduation. The money can also be spent on farm and home improvements. For instance, for a plot of land, a house, or items like mattresses, water tanks, and solar panels. It can also be spent on healthcare, which is free in principle but not in practice, or on transport. The young man in the picture at the bottom left was proud to show us the motorbike he bought from his microcredit profits. Then there are leadership skills. Lots of group leaders go on to become leaders in their communities. And the same applies to the key farmer trainers. Finally, the group has its own capital. They can continue to lend to their members or invest a part in a group project, like for instance a storage facility for maize and beans, a meeting house, or a communal garden. Microcredit gives people pride and hope for a better future. We have recorded the changes in the group's loan pools year on year. If you look at this logarithmic graph, the loan pools of a cross-section of 13 groups are listed on the right, have been plotted from the time of receiving microcredit to the point of returning it. In a few cases, we also have data about subsequent years that we put in. The bottom line is the timeline, and the logarithmic vertical line on the left shows how many millions of Ugandan shillings a group has. The thick black line is the average loan pool of those groups. So what you see in year 0 is the injection of 3 to 4 million of microcredit, which was the equivalent of $1,000. And then you see exponential growth over the next 3 years to the point of paying back the loan. The decrease of the loan pool in year 3 is the same as the increase in year 0. On this graph, it looks different, it looks smaller, but that is only because of the logarithmic presentation. One of our star groups, Chisomwa Youth, and that is the yellow dotted line going all the way to the right, came back to us in year 5 because they had made losses, as you can see. They had started group trading rather than just farming, without fully appreciating the risks they were taking. Our advice was simple. Do what you are good at, and if trying something new, start small, get experience, and diversify. As you can see, the group has continued to prosper, and the last we know is that they had 30 million shillings, $8,500, 8 times the start capital. Not all groups succeed, like Chakayanko here, and that is the pink dotted line going straight down to the bottom, to the timeline. There was uneven distribution of microcredit in that group, and some members did not make regular payments, and in the end, they distributed what was left over. But even though the group has not survived, individual members did benefit personally and learned a lot from their key farmer trainer about agriculture. On the whole, most cases, in most cases, we see continued increase of the loan pool over the microcredit period. When groups follow the guidelines, they end up with an amount at least equal to the amount of the original loan. We have had a whole group of farmers who were chased off the land by a big landowner. They had been using the land for generations, but they never registered it. But thanks to microcredit, they were able to lease the land back and to save their farms. Microcredit can break the cycle of poverty. In the words of the chairperson of the Tungamochi Bira Women's Group, she says, "Microcredit has helped our members a lot. Those with bicycles now have motorbikes. Those without land now own a plot. Those with a mud house now have a permanent house. And those without animals now have a cow." This group had 7.3 million shillings left in their loan pool after repayment of their 3 million microcredit loan. They had tripled the start capital. In the same group, one of the members, a mother with 4 children, became a widow and was chased from her house and land. And this unfortunately sometimes happens. Her group gave her fantastic support, and she told us, "Thanks to 2 loans, I can now rent 2 acres of land to grow food and cash crops, and my children are at school." She insisted on giving us a self-made basket filled with her own delicious bananas. This was a very moving moment. Finally, is agricultural microcredit needed? There is a huge need for agricultural training and investment. Government schemes don't always work as the money gets lost on its way down to the grassroots. Banks are often too expensive, and there is the risk of losing one's home or land when payments are not made on time. Bank loans also require interest payments from the start, which farmers can't pay. What are now the key elements of a successful microcredit scheme? Careful preparation before handing out microcredit loans. Clear rules and monitoring. And above all, long-term commitment. This is not a project for quickly dipping in and out of a country, spending some money. It needs perseverance, not only on the part of the farmers, but also on the part of the Rotarians. RegSet can help your Rotary Club set up a scheme. Go to the website regset.org for useful examples and tips. RegSet can also advise on how to navigate the global grant application system. For more information on this microcredit scheme or on fuel-saving stoves, you can go on to the Mubende project website, learningforlifeafrica.org. From there, you can download useful microcredit documentation like guidelines, memoranda of understanding, a code of practice, and others. And you can use the contact form to get in touch with us. There are also instructions on how to build mud stoves. I encourage you and your Rotary Club to start a new microcredit project. It is very rewarding for all concerned. If you have any questions, you can also get in touch with me directly. This is my email, mayasmulders@hotmail.com. Thank you for listening.